All right. It appears that we are on. This thing is recording. That's good. So, for anyone prospectively watching this for the first time or will listen to the audio of this on Anchor, welcome to this special edition of Burnin Rubber, the socially distanced edition of Burnin Rubber that will be broadcast on the internet across a wide variety of platforms. For those new audience members that aren't familiar with what Burnin Rubber is, allow me just like a minute or two to explain. Burnin Rubber, during a non-pandemic era, aka normal time, is a motorsports radio talk show that is held at KCOU FM. It broadcasts from KCOU, the student-run radio station on the University of Missouri campus. However, due to the current pandemic that is sweeping across the nation and the world, our broadcast center at the KCOU studio, as well as where it is housed, the MU Student Center, has been shut down indefinitely. However, that provides us the opportunity to broadcast in a new format, a different way. So with that, welcome aboard to this edition of Burnin Rubber. I am Sterling Siemens, the producer and co-host of this program. Based on my screen to my right is my co-host broadcasting from his apartment in Columbia, Missouri, Hal Estep. Hal, how are you doing today?
This is different, and I'll be honest, it's awkward, and I love it.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I'm broadcasting from my home in the Kansas City area, and our other co-host down below me is broadcasting from his home in the Chicago, Illinois area, Justin Parmer. Justin, how are you handling these times that we're going through?
Hanging in there. It's definitely a strange time indeed, but definitely making the best of it and still have a little bit of racing to talk about. So we're good here.
Fantastic. So with that, let's jump into some topics that we have prepared for us. Usually we talk a lot of motorsports, recap the weekends, seeing what all is going on. There was something to recap, thankfully. In the weekends that have been going on since Mizzou students and really a lot of the world and America in general have been basically sent home. Everyone's working from home or studying from home. That includes NASCAR, IndyCar, F1. A lot of figures in motorsports are having to readjust during these uncertain times. However, if there's been one big winner in the motorsports industry out of all of these circumstances, it's iRacing. iRacing and simulated racing have been big winners out of this whole situation. We'll start with the NASCAR races that have been held ever since the schedule has been put on basically hiatus. After the first 4 NASCAR races were run, there haven't been any run since March the 8th at Phoenix Raceway. But there have been 2 virtual iRacing events that have been held full of NASCAR drivers. It's the NASCAR iRacing Pro Invitational that has been started up and broadcast on a wide variety of networks, including Fox Sports 1 and the actual network Fox channel. 2 races at Homestead Miami Speedway and Texas Motor Speedway, virtually, of course. The winners out of those 2 events, Denny Hamlin at Homestead, beating out Dale Earnhardt Jr. in a photo finish. And believe it or not, Timmy Hill won at Texas Motor Speedway. So, again, Hal, Justin, I know these aren't real events. These aren't real races. But it's still fun to see drivers duking it out with each other and trying to bring out the arcade antics in general. Justin, I'll start with you. How are these races enjoyable for the drivers to participate and for the fans to watch online or on TV?
I think part of it has to do with how serious Fox has been taking these broadcasts. They've been treating these races like they are actual races. We've had at the pre-race prayer, we've had the national anthem. which have both kind of been hilarious. We have Troy Aikman doing the command and the startup engines. So they're treating it like it's real. And these drivers are treating it that much further. And it's an even setup, which makes it's so unique in the fact that this guy who's been running for or NBM Motorsports has basically been given in just non-existent top tier equipment for his whole career, and he wins the Pro Invitational. You can't tell me that this guy doesn't have talent. So it's a great opportunity to see a different drivers at the front of the field that you would never see. I mean, yeah, Denny Hamlin won, but Garrett Smithley was pretty much in the lead for that whole Homestead race up until the final 10 laps. So it's just entertaining, and it's been so enjoyable. The fans are loving it. The drivers are loving it. Unfortunately, we're not actually racing, but it is such a great substitute because iRacing is not an arcade game. It is actual, there's actual skill involved with it. It's not at mashing buttons, unlike Madden or 2K.
Hal, anything else to add on to that question?
I gotta say that my favorite part of watching the iRaces is that there's an obvious learning curve that comes with the program. Watching a 7-time champion like Jimmy Johnson have the hardest time in the world racing had to be one of the greatest things I've seen, because you could tell Jimmy's never used something like this. This is so new to him, and he's learning. So that's kind of cool. You get to see an elite driver have to learn through this. And then you get to see Dale back on the track. Everyone loves it when Dale Jr.'s out there, you know. And you see guys like Ty Majeski doing well. And it's really cool to see drivers who you never see covered. You never see them. They're usually in a back marker equipment in the back. And you can tell, well, there's talent there. They've just never been able to get in a really good ride. I mean, granted, it is iRacing, so don't take it too seriously how talented they really are. But Timmy Hill, he's had flashes this year, like on the real tracks. He's had pretty good runs. And now he has a win at Texas on a nationally televised iRace. That gets your name out there.
Yeah, especially considering that with Timmy Hill in his case, and Ty Majeski and Ross Chastain, now that I think about it, when you look at some of the simulators or the rigs that these drivers have built up, like you look at Denny Hamlin's, Clint Boyer, who was in the Homestead virtual race, he compared Denny Hamlin's simulator to something like a space shuttle capsule, and it cost in the thousands to make, whereas Timmy Hill's was maybe a couple $100 at the most. And yet he goes out and wins, beating William Byron, who also is a really good iRacer in his own right. But it's funny to see how guys like Jimmy Johnson and Kyle Busch, who are considered two of the greatest drivers in this modern era of NASCAR, they're struggling out there. Kyle Busch, I think he went a lap down on the second lap of the Homestead race. And Jimmy Johnson, how bad he did at Homestead. And this is looking at a USA Today article in the sports section, I kid you not, from Michelle Martinelli. Jimmy Johnson says he got a tutor to help him improve in NASCAR's iRacing events. To have a 7-time champion relying on a tutor, now given it's iRacing, so it's a little funny, but at the same time, it shows that he is dedicated to this as long as it takes for NASCAR to rely on iRacing before they get back under real racing in the future. As for IndyCar, because I want to get to talking about IndyCar as well, they had 2 races themselves. There was one that was actually sanctioned by IndyCar properly, the IndyCar iRacing Challenge at Watkins Glen International. That was the first race held last Saturday. Sage Karam started on the pole, led basically green flag to checkered flag, and ended up winning the race. You saw some unfamiliar names in IndyCar. Well, I shouldn't say unfamiliar, but names that you hadn't really heard in a while. Guys like Scott Speed, Dalton Kellett was in there. driving for, I want to say, AJ Foyt's team. Kyle Kirkwood, the defending Pro Mazda 2000 champ. And then you had the McLaren guys of Oliver Askew and Pato O'Ward. You even had Jimmy Johnson, who's going to be testing for McLaren's IndyCar team at some point this year at Barber Motorsport Park. And also there was a race on Sunday at Gateway, Worldwide Technology Raceway at Gateway, held a virtual Throwback 500 for the Bommarito Throwback 500 at the virtual Gateway track. LMP3 driver Scott Andrews was the one who took out the victory on Sunday night. But with these IndyCar races and NASCAR, we'll throw them in there too. It's just overall, it's nice to see the drivers keep themselves occupied, and at the same time, even though it's not real, not quote unquote real, it's good to see them taking this as serious as they pretty much can during these times, because there's really nothing else for them to do aside from maybe these simulators, because you can't do sponsor appearances. Their options are limited right now. Hal, I'll start with you since I started with Justin the last time. What's your take on the drivers and what they're getting out of these simulation events?
The drivers are getting an opportunity. The smaller, like Timmy Hill, smaller drivers, they're getting a chance since on national TV, their name is getting out there. It's pretty nice to just have an opportunity to get your name out there the front of a pack in any type of situation. Now, the guys who are the big-time guys, Denny Hamlin, they're just having fun. They're having fun entertaining their fans. They got their cars. The cars still have sponsors on them, which I love how they've designed them. I'm sure FedEx is enjoying this. I'm pretty sure they don't have to pay for this. So yeah, FedEx is probably going, this is great.
Yeah, not only that, but like you get guys like Garrett Smithley and Timmy Hill, they're actually picking up sponsors as a result of their appearances out here. I mean, Pit Boss just signed with Timmy Hill for a few of these virtual races, and I think maybe even an actual race, either that or Garrett Smithley. I can't remember who.
Garrett Smithley got a ride from Rick Ware Racing for the 51 car at Indianapolis later on this year, which we'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, I want to bring up a couple more points. First off, shout out to David Land and for competing in that Gateway race. I know he got wrecked out a little early, but
first lap, I think.
And here's the funny thing: these drivers have no idea. Sometimes these drivers have no clue what they're doing in these iRacing cars. It's like even Denny Hamlin last night. There was a practice race. He shot straight up the racetrack and collected an entire field of cars in the practice session. And last night on a restart, but you also have guys like Robert Wickens. I mean, he's back, he's going to be back this week in an IndyCar for iRacing. He's going to have a special setup up to where he can use his hands to both on the gas and drive the car.
Yeah,
so it's amazing. It's amazing that he's going to be back.
Yeah, I was going to say for Wickens' situation, what was really interesting about Wickens is that he was actually supposed to be in the Watkins Glen event on Saturday, but a deal that he had to get a certain simulator with hand controls, considering he's still a paraplegic, still recovering from his accident at Pocono a couple years ago. With Wickens' situation, he was supposed to be running at the Glen, but the deal fell through at the last minute. Then he tried to scramble to get a rig assembled, and it just didn't come in time. Wickens was unable to participate. Same with James Hinchcliffe, because some internet connection problems prevented Hinchcliffe from taking the green flag at Watkins Glen. But they will get another shot this weekend at the virtual Barber Motorsport Park. So that should be a fun race to watch. One more thing before, we usually take breaks. I don't know if we're going to necessarily take a break. We can pause the recording, though. But one thing I do want to discuss here, the future of iRacing, because I feel like there's been a general consensus that iRacing has been not so much disrespected, but just kind of looked down upon by a lot of people in the NASCAR community, not drivers by any stretch, or maybe even media members, but just some really hardcore fans of NASCAR and maybe even IndyCar to an extent, they see iRacing and think, this is a video game, this is ridiculous, this is stupid. But iRacing, they've got to be making out like bandits on this, especially with no motorsports happening or just no sports in general. Whoever said esports was going to be the way of the future many, many, many years ago, they've got to be looking like geniuses right now. Obviously, not the ideal, not the circumstances that led up to this, but still, it's something to really think about. So with iRacing, what does their future look like after? Well, even once we get back to real racing, because this isn't going to last forever. I think we can all agree on that. But what does their future look like once real racing returns?
I think right now, first off, right now, you have ESPN, a company who has not cared about NASCAR or IndyCar. I mean, NASCAR for about 5 years now, IndyCar for about a year. And they're calling these guys back. NASCAR's had more attention in the past 2 weeks than it's had, I would say, in 3 years. It's from ESPN. So it definitely is showing that this is real. And also the fact that it's breaking records for TV coverage in terms of esports. It has legitimacy now, but the question is, can it remain legitimate after we return to the real thing? And I think that's a little bit of a 50-50 question, and because I think there's going to be a lot more driver participation. I think you're going to see a lot more fans and go out and get iRacing, because iRacing is available to anyone. And it's not just these NASCAR guys going out and buying these multi-$1,000 rigs. You can have it for a $30 subscription and a steering wheel from a PlayStation 4, or if you find the right converters. So it's definitely has long-term stability, and hopefully it creates a new influx of drivers, and maybe even promotes a bit of another way for these guys to get into truck, Xfinity, ARCA, these types of rides, and to find their talent in the iRacing circuit.
That's a good point. Hal, anything to add on to that?
I think they were talking about on the broadcast. Didn't they say that William Byron had put in a lot of time on iRacing and it helped him basically get his ride?
Byron was an iRacing driver.
Yeah, I mean, it amazes me how much Rick Allen mentions it sometimes on broadcasts. William Byron, who grew up racing on a computer. It's like whenever Byron's about to win something, it's like, but yeah, William Byron is a very accomplished iRacing driver. Timmy Hill has logged in a lot of hours. Then you have guys that like Ty Majeski. He's even sponsored by iRacing. He's logged in a countless number of hours on there.
Christopher Bell and Kyle Larson too.
Yeah, Christopher Bell and Kyle Larson.
Chili Bowl.
Yeah, and one more thing I forgot to mention: World of Outlaws. They held an event on Wednesday night at a virtual track, and Christopher Bell won that one pretty easily. But yeah, there's a lot of drivers that have put in the time, they put in the effort on iRacing, and while some fans may look at it with scorn, it really can be useful. And I mean, with Byron, in his case, 2018, when he entered the sport, I mean, it was rough being a Cup rookie and not having a lot of experience. But once he had Chad Knaus as a crew chief, 2019 was marked improvement for Byron as a competitor, as a driver in the Cup Series. And then this year, I think his expectations are much higher, to where we expect Byron to win a race or two this season whenever it gets back up and running. Hal, was there anything else that you wanted to add on about that?
I just want to say, in terms of the fans who have looked down on iRacing, I feel like we're going to see a lot less of that now, because I cannot stress this enough. Dale Jr. is racing in these events, and the fans love and respect Dale Jr. so much that I think they'll turn a corner on this, seeing him out there.
You know who's the one driver who's still missing from these iRacing events that I'm kind of surprised has yet to show up? Tony Stewart. I like even Bobby Labonte has showed up to the party now, and Tony Stewart is known for his iRacing setups. There's a couple of YouTube videos out there with him racing on the iRacing simulators. I would not be surprised if Tony Stewart were to show up here for a few races.
Yeah, Tony Stewart, it'd be nice to see him show up, at least for one race or two. I mean, he made his own video game about sprint car racing that was put out earlier this year, right?
Yeah, that's been doing well. I've heard. I haven't gotten my hands on it, but apparently it's selling pretty well. So nice little bonus there for Tony Stewart, or the three-time Cup Series champion and IndyCar champion.
Yeah, and former IRL champ Tony Stewart. There's a chance that he might be getting back behind the wheel of a race car sooner or later. We'll talk about that later on in the show. But I do want to move on to our next subject now. Excuse me. The latest postponements in motorsports. For those that are unaware, NASCAR had set their ideal return date as Martinsville, the night race at Martinsville, which would be the second week of May. However, due to a recent issue of a stay-at-home order being extended by the governor of Virginia that extends through the month of May into the month of June, it's looking impossible now for racing to go back at Martinsville. So now NASCAR is eyeing a return at the Coca-Cola 600 weekend. That would be Memorial Day weekend, May 24th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, at this time, if NASCAR is going to return to the Coke 600, they would be the only race out of the big three that happen on the Sunday before Memorial Day. They'd be the only race happening because the Monaco Grand Prix for Formula One has been canceled, and the Indianapolis 500 for the NTT IndyCar Series has been postponed into August. So, looking at this now, with NASCAR aiming at a May 24th return at the Coke 600, what are the realistic chances of that return happening? I'll start with Justin Parmer.
I don't think we're going to get at the 600 in, just because I think and you don't know what this virus is going to do. Let's be clear. We don't know how it's going to spread, how many people are going to get it. It honestly depends on what is the spread of this virus and what is the containment of it. Now, with that being said, Charlotte would be ambitious. It would be very ambitious. And I would even throw Kansas into that category. I just don't see us racing in May. Now, with that being said, June is looking like a little bit more of a realistic possibility. So I'm hopeful that we could get some races in before, the end of June. The beginning of June. But I'm not holding out hope for it.
Hal, any additional things to add on to Justin's point?
Yeah, I agree with Justin that I'd say it's very, very ambitious to go with Charlotte near the end of May, because this is a massive unknown still, because I just can't project a date where it's going to be fine for everything to come back, because we're not going to see that for a while. There are seasons that have been postponed that have no idea when they're going to come back, because their cities that their teams play in have canceled events through June 30th. Toronto and Calgary is what I'm getting at there. I saw those reports. You could see cities that these races are taking place in do the same thing, and that could throw the entire schedule out of whack again. We're already seeing it with Martinsville. And you never know what the mayor of Charlotte might say. He might cancel events through the end of May. You don't know. So I wouldn't bet that they're going to be back at Charlotte by the end of May. It'd be really nice if they could be, but I wouldn't put any money on it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. A May 24th return is, in my opinion, very optimistic, and it's ambitious, but it may be a little over ambitious because we don't know how long this thing is going to go on. We don't know. I mean, in the United States, it's the most infected place in the world right now. And just in the state of Missouri, it's pretty big. It had a 600% increase from article I read out of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. But yeah, basically Charlotte, I'm not entirely sold that it's going to happen. I think Kansas is also in trouble with the weekend after. June is looking more realistic. I just don't know when in June they're going to come back. I do want to talk about a revised schedule, though, that was put out a couple days ago, based from The Athletic, written by Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi, looking at the revised schedule. I'm trying to pull it up right now, and it might be easier just to share the screen on this, but it is eyeing a May 24th return. There would be a lot of midweek races. Basically, there'd be several midweek races. So NASCAR fans, might be time to start gearing up for that. Looking at, it'd be May 24th at Charlotte, May 31st at Kansas. Then the Texas race, which was postponed due to the ongoing pandemic, it would be rescheduled for June 7th. So that's something to keep in mind there. Trying to be sure that
Sonoma would be the 14th. Chicagoland would be the 21st. The Pocono dates would remain the same. That would be the 27th and the 28th. July 1st would be Martinsville. That would be the first Wednesday night race of the season. And then July 5th, Indianapolis.
Yep,
and then you also have Richmond on.
Go ahead, Justin.
But you have Richmond on the 8th, Atlanta on July 12th, Kentucky on the 15th, New Hampshire on the 19th, Talladega would be a July 26th race, Homestead would be on the 29th, and then the rest of Bristol would be on August 2nd. Michigan would be a doubleheader on the August 8th and 9th, Watkins Glen the 16th, Dover would be the 22nd and 23rd, and then the rest of the schedule appears to be the same after Watkins Glen and Dover.
Yeah, it's definitely a change, and a lot of dates would be switched around. But based on what I can see here, with the Spring Martinsville race would be moved to July 1st, Indianapolis July 5th. That's going to be paired up with the IndyCar Grand Prix at Indianapolis, which would be the day before on July 4th. Richmond to July 8th, Atlanta, Kentucky, Loudon, Talladega. Talladega, that's going to be an interesting date back on July 26th. I remember back in up until the mid-90s, the Winston 500, or at least one of the races for the Cup Series at Talladega, was held in the Alabama summer in July. And there's a lot of midweek races, some doubleheader events with Michigan getting paired up and Dover getting paired up before around the time of Daytona in August, set for August 29th. Those appear to be the dates that have been adjusted or switched around. Now, based on what I'm looking at here, it does not factor in potential truck or Xfinity Series makeup dates. As for the truck and Xfinity schedules, those have not yet been released. But if NASCAR, the thing with them is they're committed to holding out and making sure they can hold all 36 races in this season. How, Estep, can 36 races be done realistically?
Realistically, Ooh, it could, but it reminds me of Dana White trying to save UFC 249 during this whole ordeal. That'd be really crazy. That'd be awesome, but how good are you going to look in terms of a PR stance if things aren't ready and you rush back out there? That's the one fear I have for NASCAR is that they've not always had a great PR sense, and this could be looked at as rushing back when things aren't ready if they do it by the 24th. And if they don't do it by the May 24th, I don't think they'll be able to do a 36 race season. So realistically, I don't think it can happen. I think they could have a slightly shortened if they do these midweek races, and that would be fine. I think nobody would complain about that, but it will be absolutely tough to have a full 36 race season, especially in these smaller teams having to prepare so many cars for 1 week. 2 races in 1 week.
Yeah.
This is definitely concerning, and I look at the schedule and I do notice that the season was pushed up. The ending of the season was pushed up to November 8th. Normally NASCAR ends around the 21st, the 22nd. And so they have a 2-week gap should Charlotte and Kansas become unavailable. With that being said, however, I don't think NASCAR is going to be able to get 36 in. I think they're going to have to condense it down to an even 32 to get the season in if you want a playoffs. If you want to playoffs, you're going to have to get something going by the mid-June. Otherwise, you're going to have to cancel the playoffs because I don't think a 10 and race playoff format's going to work under this system.
If races get condensed more and more and this pandemic keeps going longer and longer, in my opinion, the less likely that we're going to have a playoffs in NASCAR this season, which brings me to my next point. Should NASCAR even bother with playoffs for 2020? I know it would be a break from everything that they've done the last 6 years, and they've tried to get a dramatic finish to the championship for every season ever since they've had a playoff-esque system since 2004 with the chase, and then 2014 onward with the current format that they have. But these are unprecedented times that we're living in. That might mean it might be time to take unprecedented measures. Should NASCAR just ditch the playoffs for 2020 and see how it goes to decide maybe even future ramifications?
Can we go beyond 2020 with that? That's my one question about it. Should they? I mean, it depends when they come back, because the playoffs are now kind of finally accepted for what they are, even though it's kind of ridiculous in general. But changing it for a year, that'd be an interesting championship, and there would be some kind of contested views by many fans of certain drivers. Say Denny Hamlin in the playoff system would win the championship, but they go back to the old, just straight up point system, and Kevin Harvick wins. Hamlin fans are going to be angry for the rest of eternity. This was finally the year, and the playoffs didn't exist for 1 year, and he loses. That would be Carl Edwards tiebreaker type of heartbreak.
Yeah, that would be my one concern with this. If NASCAR decided to get rid of it for just 1 year, it could result in something like that happening. Justin, go ahead. You were about to say something.
It would be a huge asterisk almost if the champion would be decided by a regular season. At this point in NASCAR's title history, I mean, say what you will about the playoffs, but normally at the end of the season, there is no question of who is the champion.
Normally.
Normally, I mean, and the only outlier I can think of was last year's truck champion.
Yeah.
And Tyler Reddick in 2018, but although he did back that up last season. However, I think NASCAR is going to modify the playoffs this year. I don't think they're going to dump the winner takes all Homestead race. I think they're gonna either they're probably gonna condense the playoffs to around 8 races and have let's just say I'm spitballing here, but at the round of 16 you run 4 races and then it cuts down to the round of 8 and then you run those 3 races and then you're down to the championship rate 4. I think that's where NASCAR is likely going to go, and I think that would be more accepted under this circumstance because you have a little bit more of natural playoffs for this season alone, and then you can easily modify it back to what it was as in 2019, 2018. But the one thing I will say, and I'm kind of catching myself, you don't want a situation and by adding the 13th man.
No.
You don't want to have a 13th man situation like you did back in 2013 it was with Jeff Gordon.
Yeah, you don't want to, or in this case, it would probably be a 17th man. You don't want something like that, especially with, I mean, things are already unstable enough with this pandemic going on and a return to racing not fully set in stone. But if a situation like that were to arise again, it would not be a good look on NASCAR or the playoff system.
I mean, and people are still ticked off about Kyle Busch's title in 2015. Let's think. I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
people are still ticked off that Kyle Busch won the title in 2015, and because he crashed in the Xfinity race, and he came back 11 weeks later and just absolutely whooped everybody. I'm almost a little bit concerned, and with or without the playoff system, that might happen to Ryan Newman, and who's probably going to be the biggest beneficiary of the time off.
Well, I think Newman and Brett Moffitt would be the two biggest beneficiaries out of this because we haven't talked about it on the show up until this point because the last show he did was March 14th. But with Brett Moffitt, he broke, I think, both of his legs in a dirt bike accident during the weekend that was set for the Atlanta truck race. Not long after he broke his legs. His timetable was 6 to 8 weeks, though, and incredibly, he'll probably recover quickly enough to get back in the truck series without missing a race. I mean, talk about a stroke of great luck for Brett Moffitt, given obviously the circumstances surrounding it are really dire. But
best wishes to him, first off.
Best wishes to Moffitt and to Ryan Newman, especially during these times. And best of luck to their recoveries. They just take all the time they need, basically. That's what we'll say. And while we're on the subject of schedules, because we've gone on quite a bit for the NASCAR schedule, let's talk about the IndyCar schedule. I've got it pulled up right here. In fact, I'll go ahead and share the screen on this. Let me find the button. Okay, here we are. So this is from the IndyCar Series website. Looking at their schedule, they're set to return on the Chevrolet Duel in Detroit, the doubleheader. Now, again, this is with changes pending if the pandemic continues longer and longer. Then you have the 600-kilometer event at Texas Motor Speedway on June the 6th. Then you go to Road America, June 21st. IndyCar returns to Richmond on June 27th. Then you get the Indy Grand Prix. That will be a doubleheader with the NASCAR Xfinity and Cup Series. IndyCar will run on the 4th of July on the Indy Motor Speedway road course, along with the Xfinity Series. Then the next day, the Brickyard 400 will happen with NASCAR. The Honda Indy Toronto, they announced on Wednesday, April the 1st. Their date is set for July 12th for the IndyCar event. Iowa Speedway will be July 18th. The Honda Indy 200 at Mid-Ohio was set for August 9th. Then you go to the Indianapolis 500 on August 23rd. That date, the 23rd, was initially the date set for the Bommarito Automotive Group 500 at Worldwide Technology Raceway at Gateway. That has been moved to August the 30th. And then they'll get a couple of weeks off, or actually just a week off before they go to Portland International Raceway for the Grand Prix of Portland on the 13th. Then they have the Grand Prix of Monterey at Laguna Seca for the September the 20th. And another race that is not listed on here, but I do want to bring it up, the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg. It was set to be the first race of the season. However, that race has been, it was canceled, but now it's been uncanceled. IndyCar and the race promoters in St. Petersburg are trying to find a way to fit in the St. Petersburg Grand Prix to make it the season finale for the IndyCar Series season. I mean, Hal, Justin, we've just looking back on it, the St. Petersburg Grand Prix has been really successful as the season opener for IndyCar the last several years running since, I believe, 2009. It's been actually, it was the season opener for 2009. Then ever since 2011, it's been the consistent season opener for IndyCar. It's proven to be a great location to open the season, to kickstart the new campaign for IndyCar every year. For St. Petersburg to host the IndyCar finale, that'd be something pretty special, especially considering how they were set to start the year and then had the race canceled, only for it to be uncanceled now. And it works out really well in favor of the promoter, obviously the promoters for the race, and especially fans who were there at the track, showed up, and were getting set to, they had made plans to attend this race. And then for it to just go by the wayside initially, it's really fair for the fans that they get this race. And I really like the decision to bring St. Petersburg, to put it somewhere in the schedule, even if that means at the end of the season. Hal, Justin, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it is a great move. Ending the season with a race that everyone seems to pretty much enjoy, you know, that's always a strong indicator that you've got your head on straight when scheduling, even in dire circumstances. I think that it would definitely be one of the most unique situations, going from an opening race to the finale. And I think the track will definitely be packed at the end of it, if is hoping that everything can blow over, of course. But that would be probably one of the more wild stories of this entire thing, going from the opener to straight up canceled, not just postponed, canceled, to, well, you're the finale now. We know you can give us a good race for the finale, to crown a champion. I love it.
Yeah, I really love the idea of St. Petersburg getting the final race of the season. I've kind of felt like that race was going to be eventually a permanent staple, if it wasn't already, as the opener. But for this year, I think you can make that exception. I really love the idea that that race will be now the finale. And I will say one thing: I'm not the biggest fan of Duels to Detroit being the first race of the season tentatively. However, I understand why, and that's just something that you're gonna have to live with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Detroit opening up the season. In fact, I'm going to be honest, I'm not a big fan of Detroit being the first race right after the Indy 500 usually is.
I don't think anybody is.
I mean, if it were my way, I would have the race at Texas be the first race after the Indy 500, or at least a race on an exciting, fast-paced oval. I mean, I'd be happy to see IndyCar return to Milwaukee. I know that's probably not going to happen anytime soon, but back when the IRL was still in their fledgling stages, not even fledgling, but just right before reunification with the Champ Car World Series to make the unified IndyCar that we know and love today, IRL, they had their excuse me, they had their first race after the Indy 500 be the race at Milwaukee, and then they'd go to Texas, and then they'd have whatever was next on the schedule. But to have a race like Detroit after the Indy 500, I mean, congrats, you got this great, exciting event that brings in a lot of prestige and is really popular. The Indy 500. It's the greatest spectacle in racing. Now watch us go do this street race at Detroit. Nothing against Detroit or Belle Isle. It's a beautiful facility, and it's a great thing for IndyCar to go there. But does it really have to be the first race after the Indy 500? I don't think so. It can be pushed back later in the schedule. Bring up a place like Texas or Gateway or Iowa. Fill in that spot to be the first race after the Indy 500.
The one thing I also noticed about that schedule that you didn't point out, well, June 6th for Texas. Guess what's the day after or on the tentative NASCAR schedule? So we might not have one, we might have two doubleheaders with the Cup guys this season, a 500 and a 600 back to back. And that would be a very interesting combination. I don't think they're going to be able to get anything done to have a couple of crossovers for Texas, but the seeds would definitely be there for the 500.
Yeah, for a race at Texas, if you did point it out, I had not even thought of that, but it is a doubleheader the way it's set up. With IndyCar and NASCAR, the way this pandemic has been unfolding, if it subsides quickly enough, there's going to be a lot of doubleheader events. It may not be with just NASCAR strictly, but with IndyCar and NASCAR, with them pairing up together for the Brickyard, and now with this doubleheader set for Texas, you're not going to have to make any adjustments to the Texas track. The way it is now, that's how it's going to be raced for the oval, for the IndyCar series, and now for NASCAR to be run the same day. The question I think I would have, though, is this might be irrelevant, but the grip level, considering they run different tire compounds, different types of rubber that would be laid out on the track, because IndyCar races Firestone tires, NASCAR runs Goodyear. I don't think it'll be that much of a problem, but there have been races where I've seen ARCA, when they ran on Hoosier tires, it was a slight issue for IndyCar and NASCAR when they were running on different tire compounds. But that aside, this would be a great thing for both IndyCar and NASCAR to pair together and run doubleheader weekends.
You gotta think Roger Penske, and to kind of address that comment, and I think after the IndyCar race, NASCAR might be applying PJ1 onto the racetrack. So that might have a little bit of a difference if things go south with the Firestone tires. But I'm really hoping for success with that. NASCAR fans and IndyCar fans have been wanting this combination for, or I don't know how many years. It's finally going to happen. We have a middleman. His name is Roger Penske, and I'm all for NASCAR and IndyCar collabing as much as they can going forward, because I think it just only benefits both of sports.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll be the most exciting weekends for motorsports fans possible. Having them all, I want to see some crossovers. I really do, because it's so interesting every time we consider somebody running the double, and it rarely comes to fruition because they're just too far away. The races could coincide with something getting postponed just a little bit. Now the possibility is right there, because both of them are right there, same place, same weekend. Logistically, it's going to be tough, but if they keep scheduling these in upcoming seasons, you could see it much more often.
Yeah, I feel like if these doubleheader weekends are really successful, which I have a great feeling that they're going to be, it's going to be a huge thing in the future. It reminds me of when NASCAR and IndyCar were battling each other for young drivers to come into the sport, and for which series could have more fans going up from the 80s into the 90s, up until the American Open wheel split between CART and IRL. That's when NASCAR really took advantage of their split and gained a lot of popularity from the late 90s into the 2000s before they hit basically their cultural peak in 2005, 2006 before trailing off. with IndyCar, once they reunified in 2008 with Card and then Champ Car, when they reunified together for the '08 season, and now with the way their TV contract is played out with NBC beginning last year, it's really, things are on the up and up for IndyCar right now, and especially for the Indy 500 for this last decade, which, by the way, if you haven't seen the video from David Land for his IndyCar Indy 500 video through the 2010s, it's great perspective, great insight on how the 500 has basically become a big world-renowned race once again. It's gained back its lore, and it's going to be great to see what the 500 does to start this decade in the 2020s with Roger Penske at the helm of both IMS and IndyCar, postponing the race until August. But I feel like if anyone can bring it out of this uncertain era, it's Roger Penske.
And I don't know about the 500 though. Like, I feel like, and we've had this conversation, I think the 500 takes a back seat this year, or tentatively. If the 4th of July weekend in IRL with the Indy Grand Prix, the Xfinity race on the road course, and the Cup race, I think that's going to be a much bigger in terms of the racing community. The racing community is probably going to view that week bigger than the 500. Outside of the racing community, I think the 500 is still going to be the bigger week. But I think inside the community, I think the Grand Prix weekend is going to be a lot bigger this year.
I think,
for a few reasons.
In terms of, I think the way I'm understanding it is, in terms of bringing everyone together, the Grand Prix weekend, 4th of July, for Indy Grand Prix and the Brickyard 400 is going to do more to bring both sides of IndyCar and NASCAR, to bring them together in that weekend. That's going to do more than it will for the Indy 500. That I can understand.
I think it's more. I think it's going to be more significant in terms of long-term longevity. That's what I'm arguing for.
Longevity there.
Yeah, it's more of a longevity argument if it's successful, if this race is successful, the gates are open, and NASCAR has delayed the 2021 schedule. And I think they've done that for a number of reasons, but I think they want to see how these doubleheaders work, and if they work, Eric, they're probably saying, okay, what other races can we schedule together? Can we do Gateway? Can we do Iowa? Can we do Richmond even? And what races can we combine? And NASCAR likes to do things in bulk. They're like Six Flags. That's when they do that. They like to buy in bulk. But, and I would caution it because it would become the new thing like night racing. But a healthy number of combined weekends would definitely not hurt the sport.
Hal, Estep, anything to add on to that?
I think I mostly agree with what Justin was saying. I was really on the fence when you were talking about the Indy 500, but you got me by the end of it when you told me about the significance. You're right on the money on that, because these double headers would be huge. It would be one of the more significant developments in the world of racing in the last 5 or 6 years, really, if you could get double header weekends at regular tracks. And you're right on the money on the fact that they need to temper it. Do not spam double header weekends, because you make it less special when they happen.
Like
you have to have.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, exactly like that. So you need to make sure, pick and choose these races that you do this with. Make it them. You gotta also promote as hard as possible, so that people are like, this is a big weekend. We have to tune in, because this doesn't happen every weekend. We had 2 races from 2 different series on one track. That's crazy. Yeah. Don't make it to where, it's another weekend with another double header.
Yeah. I remember I think it was 2013 when IndyCar first had the doubleheader experiment. They put it for 3 different weekends for doubleheader events. They had it for Detroit, which they still do it for. They had it for Toronto, if I remember correctly, and they had it for Houston when they still ran in the parking lot of NRG Stadium at what was then Reliant Park in Houston. But after a while, Houston went away because they couldn't promote the race well enough. Toronto eventually got rid of the doubleheader idea. So now Detroit is unique in that it has 2 races per weekend for IndyCar. And I didn't mean to cut you off there, Hal, but it's like the Roval argument. The Charlotte Roval for NASCAR has been a great thing since it's been introduced. I just don't want NASCAR to go crazy over it and be like, oh, let's have a Texas Roval. Let's have a Kansas Roval. Let's
have Indy. Hey, Daytona.
Indy
You're
Roval.
already seeing that happen with the Roval. And the another thing I do want to say, I'm fine with it for this year, but don't do it in bulk. Wednesday night races. Let's see how this goes with the Wednesday nighters that are inevitably going to happen. It's been something that fans have clamored for years. However, I don't want 6 Wednesday night races in my season. And it's going to mess up a lot of things. Don't buy in bulk, NASCAR. Or just don't do it. We don't need it.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to think. Considering how long the NASCAR schedule is, I think 2 or 3 would be realistic. I'd be fine with it. If it's 6, that's too much. But moving on to other schedule changes. I keep pressing the wrong button here. Other schedule changes concerning Formula One, because their season right now is a little uncertain as we look at the latest updates from Formula One. In light of the ongoing COVID-19 situation, Formula One has announced a number of race postponements in the interests of safety for our fans, the communities we visit, and the F1 community. Based on a survey, just like a Q&A session between reporters and F1 CEO Chase Carey, given the constantly evolving situation with the pandemic, at the moment it is not possible to say for certain when racing will be able to resume. Looking further down the list, the first 8 races of the season have been postponed or canceled. That includes Australia, Bahrain, Vietnam, China, the Netherlands, Spain, Monaco, and Azerbaijan. Australia and Monaco have been canceled outright. Meanwhile, the remaining 6 Grand Prix are simply postponed. Chase Carey also told fans that there is significant potential for additional postponements, but none have been announced as of this time. And the current aim is to stage between 15 and 18 races for the 2020 season. And concerning their mid-season break that they usually have between July and in the late August, there will be no mid-season break as a result of the ongoing pandemic. The traditional summer showdown, where every shutdown, I should say, where every F1 team is required to cease all work relating to car development or racing activities for 2 weeks, has been brought forward to March and April and extended to 3 weeks. This means there will be no break later in the season. So as of now, we don't really know what the new calendar is going to look like, but also we can anticipate that the Formula One season will extend beyond the original end date of November 27th through the 29th, and that we'll likely be seeing racing in December for Formula One. But it's right now, we don't really have a timetable as to when Formula One will get back to racing at this time. Hal, Justin, I guess we'll start with Hal. Are there any thoughts to share on Formula One's situation and where they stand right now?
This is a weird way to say it. This is where NASCAR and IndyCar benefit from being mostly in one country, because you generally know throughout the country when things are going to improve. Formula One is global. They go around the world, and every country has a different circumstance with this virus. So it's going to be tough to schedule around. Say you have it could get exponentially better in certain places before say average. I can't say that one. I try, but I can't. But say it gets better there before in the Netherlands. Are you going to schedule that before, or it's tough to schedule around that because you can't predict where it's going to get better or where it gets worse?
It's going to be really tough for F1 to make these decisions, and a lot. Can definitely see you're going to have to deal with international governments. You're going to have to deal with travel bans. You're going to have to deal with if restrictions inside your own country. I mean, a lot of these teams are staged in Britain, and so it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that affects it, especially with even in UK Parliament getting it and Boris Johnson and also receiving the coronavirus. It's going to be interesting. And you also have places like Italy and Spain. And also you can throw Monaco in there because Monaco's right next to Italy. How has that affected there? And are they on are they going to be quicker on the curve than everybody else? South Korea right now seems to be that they have this thing and better off than most also the rest of the world. Do they potentially even get in a race here? And what about China? I think that's going to be a big question of what do you do with China?
Yeah.
Specifically the race in Shanghai. Because right now, you don't know. You don't, you have the numbers that China's reporting, but do you really know the numbers you're getting from China? And is it safe to go back to where the coronavirus started? And so there's going to be a lot of decisions that F1's going to have to make. It'll be interesting to see what they have to do with Austin and Mexico, Brazil. I'm guessing that's where the final 3 races are going to be because that's going to be in the warmer climates.
Well, don't forget Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi as well. That might be a move to the finale.
I mean, Abu Dhabi,
Yeah,
it's set for the finale at this time, November 27th through 29th. It was going to be the finale anyway, but they'll probably push that back as the season goes on. But in concerns of where they can get back on the schedule, it's really dependent on how F1 interprets reports from recent countries and from many different types. And Justin, you mentioned countries are affected by this. Like almost everyone is affected by this. In the UK, there's several teams that are based in the UK. Italy, where it's just like people are dying by the hundreds into the thousands, it seems, every day. There are 2 big teams, 2 teams in Formula One that are based in Italy. You have Ferrari, the giant of Formula One, basically modern day Hendrick, Joe Gibbs, Roush, legacy motorsports teams of that combined. That's Ferrari and Formula One. They're based in Italy. So is AlphaTauri, the basically Red Bull satellite team, and many other operations in Italy based there. And Hal also mentioned it. Basically, it works for NASCAR and IndyCar that they're based primarily in one country, because on an international scale, it's going to be much more difficult to gauge when they can get back to racing and where they can race this season, especially considering these times that we're going through. We've gone on quite a bit about scheduling. I think that's all we'll talk about for this week. We'll be doing these at least once a week every Friday night, and then we'll be talking about scheduling more and more for other series as it goes on. But I do want to get to some other topics, starting with something involving a certain Floyd Mayweather money team. Hal, you have the weekly money team update for us. Tell us, what have you got?
Everybody, this is a big week because we actually have a money team update.
Oh boy!
So,
oh my! Here we go.
Oh boy!
So I decided to do my main way of researching the Money Team, and that's search Money Team Racing on Google. And I found out they have a J-Ski page. So first of all, congratulations to the Money Team Racing number 50 team for having a J-Ski page.
Hi.
And
Anything else?
we have a name to throw in the hat for who could potentially be a driver for them. Jeffrey Earnhardt tried to get into one of the iRacing Pro Invitational races in the number 50 car, and Adam Stern reports that this is a nod to how he's possibly looking at driving for Floyd Mayweather's team. So throw Jeffrey Earnhardt's name into the hat.
Oh. And
So there's your update. I can't believe we've actually had one.
we actually have a Money Team update. That's incredible. I mean, for the last few weeks, I've been introducing, this is your Money Team update. And Hal, you basically report there is no news on the Money Team.
For a while, there just wasn't.
We've been doing it for like months now.
That's great. So officially, this has been your Money Team update. Wow, we actually have something to report on them. That's great. Moving on to the next subject, something that was reported, I believe it was last night, or well, yesterday, I should say. NASCAR and the development of their next-gen car, which was set to debut next season. Initially, they announced that it would be delayed until further into the 2021 season. However, Toyota, one of the manufacturers and probably the most dominant manufacturer in NASCAR right now, they recommended that the next-gen car be delayed until the 2022 season. NASCAR has decided that the next-gen car will be delayed until the 2022 season. In my opinion, this is the right call for NASCAR, because if you remember what happened with the introduction of the car of tomorrow, when they in 2007, they had 20 races run with the Gen 4 car, and then the other 16 were run with the car of tomorrow. There were a lot of teams that were in financial trouble trying to balance development on both cars. And then the car of tomorrow got rushed. It was supposed to go full-time in 2009. Eventually, they moved it up to 2008. So with this decision for NASCAR to delay the next-gen car until 2022, in my opinion, this is going to save the teams a lot of money, and it will provide them some more financial flexibility as they get set and try to develop the resources that are needed for the 2022 car. Hal or Justin, either one of you, what's your take on NASCAR delaying the next-gen car's debut until 2022?
It's the right call in my opinion, because for one, watching the few races we have gotten to watch this year, it looked like they finally got the aero package right, and we're finally seeing this generation's best iteration of racing. And I feel like that not getting another chance to really see the peak of this car, we need to see it. We need to see a full season of it. It will be a little bit, it's kind of disappointing, because I think we were all looking forward to seeing what this next-gen car was going to do on the track. We were all looking forward to it, but we can still look forward to it. It's just going to be a year later. I think it was absolutely the right call.
It was ambitious to have it in 2021 in the first place. When NASCAR came out and said that last year, we're going to have the 2021 car, the Gen 7 ready by 2021. At first, I'm like, that is a very ambitious, and I mean ambitious plan. So you had to delay this car. And again, and you also screwed around the point of a lot of teams were in financial trouble in 2007, and with the Gen and 5 coming. You look at today, you look at the financial situation now for a lot of these teams. You look at Petty, you look at teams like Starcom, you look at Front Row, you look at a lot of these smaller teams. A move to the Gen 7 would kill these teams if you did it in 2021. And I mean, I've been saying for a while now that a lot we're going to lose some teams in this transition. I think you're going to see a lot more teams in trouble at the moment than what you have. I definitely helps that they're going to delay this till 2022. It was absolutely the right decision. Plus, as allowing this car to show off for one more year when you have the package right isn't necessarily a bad thing. But there's also part of me that says they can maybe even extend this a little further into 2023 because we talk about the new engine and the engine's potentially coming out around 2023, 2024. Teams are not ready to make investments into $250,000 race cars at the moment. They're not going to be able to do that. And a little bit of news earlier, as the show was kind of beginning, Front Row is laying off 33% of its employees temporarily at the moment. It's not looking good for a lot of these teams. And without any backing by NASCAR, we might have a situation like 2008 where we lost pretty much a third of the field.
Yeah, it's not a good situation for – I mean, there are some teams that were already in trouble sponsorship-wise that didn't have a lot of funding, that don't have as much funding as the giants of the sport. And I'm going to share the screen again because NASCAR today, they announced some layoffs in their sport. This is from NBC Sports and Nate Ryan. NASCAR addresses company layoffs and staff reductions at Iowa Speedway. They address company-wide layoffs that were announced on Friday, and that will significantly impact the staffing of one racetrack in particular, that being Iowa Speedway. They've moved to a centralized model at Iowa Speedway, meaning the majority of its staff has been dismissed. The track will retain President David Hyatt and a small staff in operating its races this year. The staff at Kansas Speedway, which is about 4 hours away from Iowa, for example, just from my location, it's about just under an hour west of here, will assist the operation of Iowa Speedway. NASCAR, and this is another crucial thing to take out, they haven't finalized their 2021 schedule because of obviously the extenuating circumstances that are unfolding right now. They have delayed the announcement of their 2021 NASCAR schedule, which was supposed to come out around this time. So, yeah, a lot of businesses have been laying off employees, at least temporarily, around the country and around the world. NASCAR is no different. And at the end of the day, this pandemic is affecting everybody. Everyone on every team is being affected by this in some way, shape, or form. And it's a tough time, but with these, these layoffs are happening, and it's unfortunate. But hopefully, and fingers crossed and knock on wood, it's not like this for very long. I'll say.
And
that.
I do want to point out real quick, a lot of the firings today, these were coming due to the merger of the Speedway Corporation and ISC. This was due to the merger, or this normally happens in a lot of companies. So this was coming anyways. Unfortunately, it comes at probably one of the worst possible times. But I cannot stress enough, NASCAR is going to need to help these teams in any way possible. And I don't want to get into it this week, but there needs to be a serious talk about the charter system. And because after this season, I don't think we're going to have any more buyers. We're not going to have as buyers coming in. Maybe Money Team, maybe Inspire picks up a few, but you're not going to have buyers. You're going to have a bunch of sellers, and that's not going to work for a charter system.
That'll be a discussion for possibly next week to save up. Hal, any thoughts on the layoffs for NASCAR today?
I don't have much to say other than that it's pretty heartbreaking for all the employees that got laid off. Justin's right. This is the worst possible time for someone to be laid off because there are not a lot of places that will be hiring until this is over.
Yeah, it's definitely an uncertain time that's being faced for everyone, really, right now. How NASCAR rebounds from this, or how they move forward, and how the teams move forward from this after this pandemic subsides, will be seen once it subsides. Basically, it will be interested to see how their response is. We're starting to run short on time, but there are a couple things I want. Actually, just one other headline I want to talk about, and this to me is just insane. This Bleacher Report article. I mean, look at this. Look at the headline. Red Bull's Helmut Marko suggested that the drivers become infected with COVID-19. I did not misread that. That's what it said. Helmut Marko, part of the management team for Red Bull Motorsport, basically one of the head honchos at Red Bull, suggested the team's Formula One drivers and juniors should come together for a camp to be infected with COVID-19, saying they are all strong young men in good health. That way, they would be prepared whenever the action starts. I'm terrified to think what the action means. But, I mean, the idea was abandoned after the rest of management argued against it. Well, no, no kidding. I mean, oh my gosh.
We're back to the smallpox there, or everybody, we're going to get your kids infected with smallpox.
No, this is just this whole
No,
thing.
it's just, no, it is.
It's
it
ridiculous.
is a no.
I mean, I guess if you want to try to build up herd immunity or make sure to strengthen the immune system of young drivers, maybe you'd have a case. But to deliberately infect them? Oh my gosh, that sounds so wrong on so many different levels.
These guys put their lives on the line every single week in and week out, for us, the fans, for the drivers, for the sponsors, for the teams. They go out there and risk their lives so that they can get paid at the end of the day. We do not need to risk them further than what we are already doing.
Yeah, they already have a dangerous job as it is. You don't have to make it worse by doing this.
I mean, that's like cutting. I mean, and the Tony Stewart quotes are just rushing back. Like, this is probably a cutting off a leg of a chair, of a four-legged chair. It's why. Why are we even thinking about this? This is 2020. This is not the 1970s. It's where we go, I'll have kids. It's over for a sleepover. That way they get smallpox. This is not this is not that generation.
We have hit the point. We have hit that point in this broadcast.
I'm just imagining how this conversation went. Guys, I want you to think about this just real quick, throwing it out there, spitballing. Get them all together and they get coronavirus. Helmet, what did you just say to me? What? Somebody get this man out of the room.
Yeah.
Check his temperature all the way out.
It's not a good look for Marko, and I think he apologized or at least retracted some of the remarks about that afterward, which I would think he probably would have done anyway, especially considering management was like, no, it's a terrible idea, don't do it. And it astounds me how he suggested doing it, considering there was an official from McLaren who had COVID-19 in Australia that weekend. I don't understand it. There's some things that baffle me when I see them, when I read it like out in print, it just makes me think, why? And I feel, in a way, I feel dumber after it. I feel like I lost IQ points. But
I mean, that's not the first time we've lost IQ points for big articles this season, and I'll say that much. But and, and again, and it's not just the drivers that are having to worry about dealing with COVID-19. You're worrying about the team members, the crew chiefs, the owners, there's the fans that they potentially might interact with, the volunteers who go to the racetrack who might be with them. You get these guys infected, and you go out after 2 weeks of being locked in and getting the coronavirus, and you might start a second wave. Dave, it's not something I would recommend, and I don't know what he was thinking with it. He was probably drinking way too much Red Bull. Oh, to even. I'm sorry, I had to.
oh,
But probably too much sleep, Red Bull, and a lack of sleep
maybe,
that probably causes stupid ideas.
I don't know. I don't know about that. It's just ridiculous. Okay. We're starting to run pretty close to the time limit I've given here. So let's move on to a slightly different topic and make some picks for the iRacing events that are going on, at least the two that we know of. The NASCAR event that will be happening at the virtual Bristol Motor Speedway and the iRacing event at the virtual Barber Motorsport Park. I'm going to start by looking at or at least trying to find the entry list for the Bristol event.
It's an adventure, I'll tell you.
The eNASCAR iRacing Pro Invitational Series is getting a new look, providing a different spin, both past and present. I'm trying to find the
Entry lists usually come out on Saturday. However, most of the drivers who compete at Homestead, and we're back for Texas, so I can assume everybody's going to be back. Heck, there's not going to be an open this week, which kind of stinks. I was kind of hoping that guys like Trace Briscoe could race their way into the field, but basically any driver who showed up last week is going to be in it this week for Bristol.
Yep. So with that, I'm going to pull up the IndyCar entry. Well, I've got it pulled up here, but real quick, let's make some predictions for the NASCAR Bristol race. It sounds like it's going to be like 2 heats leading up to a main event. So, Hal Estep, I'm going to start with you. Who is your predicted winner for the NASCAR iRacing event at Bristol?
I have the odds pulled up, and Timmy Hill's a favorite. One problem for Timmy Hill. Dale Jr. just sent out a tweet a couple days ago. They directed 2 different points of contact to get Timmy Hill a better sim rig, and he turned them down. I don't think Dale's going to take getting turned down lightly. He's going to spin Timmy Hill at some point in a crucial moment, and that is going to cost Timmy Hill the race. Dale Jr. also cost himself the race because there must be some kind of penalty for that, right? With that being said, William Byron, the veteran of iRacing, will go out there and get the win.
I mean, Daniel Suarez got penalized for trying to wreck Ty Dillon. I say trying to. He tried. He failed. He wrecked himself, and iRacing parked him. One of the most hilarious things I've seen in a long time. He basically did a Danica at Kansas 2012. Justin, your prediction for Bristol?
He blamed the dog afterwards, but as far as Bristol, I think it's going to be a driver that hasn't really been known for iRacing, and I'm kind of scared to say it, but when you think of Bristol, who's an underdog that has dominated that track in the past couple of years?
Just tell me. We're running short on time.
Matt DiBenedetto is going to get his first win at Bristol. It's going to come.
Virtually.
It's got to come eventually.
I'm going to say if Dale Jr. is in this race, I'm picking him just because I think he's going to do a bump and run on someone or he's going to spin him out accidentally, but he'll do a bump and run. He'll win it. Now for the IndyCar event that I want to pull up real quick. They're going to be racing at Barber, and let's have a look at the entry list. If if there is an entry list. There was one that was put out. Okay, here we go. I think I just clicked the wrong link. Here we go. Viewing the entry list. Okay, so we have Joseph Newgarden, Scott McLaughlin, Sebastian Bourdais, Pato Award, Wickens, Askew, Erickson, Dixon, Rosenquist, Kaiser, Power, Kanan, Rahal, Ferrucci, Daly, Carpenter, Pagano, Karam, Veach, Rossi, Kirkwood, Hinchcliffe, Kellett, Johnson, Palu, Nazar, Harvey, Herta, and Speed. So, who are you taking for Barber, Hal Estep?
Not Jimmy Johnson, that's for sure. This is a young man's game, quite frankly, I think. And in terms of that, I think the rookie, Oliver Askew, will get the win.
That's a nice choice. Justin?
Scott Dixon wrecked out pretty early in last week's event, and I know he's a bit of an iRacer, and I just have a gut feeling that it's going to be a veteran this week. I think Scott Dixon gets it done.
All right. For me, I'm going to pick, let's see, Barber Motorsport Park. I got to think, who would I pick in this situation? You know what? I'm just going to pick last week's winner, Sage Karam. He was really just being out front is going to be crucial. And Sage Karam won the pole for Watkins Glen, led the whole thing basically, and went on to win. I'm going to pick Sage Karam for 2 weeks in a row. He'll take that virtual Dreyer and Reinbold racing machine to victory lane. So, with that out of the way, we're basically almost out of time here. Any last words, Hal or Justin?
I'd like to apologize to Jimmy Johnson for roasting him on 2 different occasions in this one episode.
Justin?
Stay safe out there. Wash your hands. And if you have, stay indoors, even if your state doesn't have a stay-at-home order, or just stay safe. Keep your friends and family safe. If the sooner we self-quarantine and everything, the sooner we get back out.
Absolutely. Stay home unless you absolutely necessarily have to leave the house. If you have to leave the house, that's fine. But please, stay at home, slow the spread, wash those hands for 20 seconds, and also just be courteous to all the workers out there who are essential, especially at places like grocery stores, like me. Yeah. So be kind to all your Walmart associates out there. So with that, that's going to do it for the first edition of this, Burnin Rubber, the socially distanced edition. The audio version of this will go out on anchor.fm on our site for the Burnin Rubber show and podcast. It will also be out on Spotify, and hopefully this will go out on YouTube on a particular channel. So with that out of the way, he is Hal Estep. He is Justin Parmer, and I am Sterling Siemens. Thank you all for taking the time to listen or watch this on whatever time you have available. So until next week, I am Sterling Siemens, signing off.